Let us pray for peace, justice, and for the conversion of sinners. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and the hour of our death. Amen. Mary, seat of wisdom,
pray for us.
in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So we continue our reflection on, I will say, the essence of God. In the measure as a poor creature, we can know Him, but we can arrive through reason to know something valuable about God from our own experience. So the way we can understand a little bit, because if you say, I understand perfectly, you are God. But you know, to understand a little bit the way God knows, we have to refer to our own experience of knowing. The reason why I give you that paper, those who study with me philosophy of man, they are familiar with that. The other, they have to understand, because that chart, because it is a synthesis of our theory of knowledge, and we know God through our theory of knowledge. So it is very important. Huh? Okay, so the first paragraph, the divine life. So life as we know it in our experience is characterized by change and succession. I knew that my cat was living when, after coming back to my cat to bury it, he jumped, he was living. So I say he is living because he was able to move. When you cannot able to move, you have to check if something. Finally, you go to the hospital, they check your heart. Huh? You see that on the screen. That is finished. Huh? If there is a perfect line, that means it is no more motion. Huh? Okay? But change and succession cannot be found in the simple, immutable, and eternal being, as we saw before. We saw that God, just before, is simple, because it's pure act, is immutable, he cannot acquire a new perfection, because it's pure act, and eternal being. He cannot become, because if he becomes, he passes for potency to act. Therefore, change cannot be a reality in God. For us, change is a quality, a reality. If I cannot change, I cannot move, I'm not living. But in the case of God, it's the contrary. If there is some change, some passage, what is change? Passage from potency to act. Therefore, God is not pure act. Okay? So I continue. Hence, change and succession are not of the nature of life. Life by itself is a quality and implies no limitation. Well, you remember we spoke about that before. Any quality by itself has no limitation. Beauty, truth, love, all those qualities have no limitation. No. Because by the fact they have a perfection, they don't include a limitation. A perfection is not, by definition, an imperfection. You know, a perfection is something positive. So I cannot ask to truth to have limitation. I cannot ask to beauty to have limitation. You know, okay. So life is the most important quality we have. There is a difference between a stone and a flower. Flower has life. The stone has no life. Is the reason why a flower is more valuable metaphysically than a diamond. But on St. Valentine, I don't think they will offer a flower. I love so much you, I give you a living being, a flower. I think girls prefer to have a diamond. But that is dead. The flower is living. Okay. It is better to be a cat than the flower. Because I have a life, sentient life. It is better to be a man than a cat. You know, because I have the intellect. So life is a quality. And if it is a quality, it must be in God, no? because God is infinitely perfect. So God must possess perfectly life. Not only he possesses life, he is life. He is the source of life. And what are one of the characteristics of life for man? One of the most important activity we have as a being, as a human being.
Existence.
Yes, existence is the first. But distinguish you from your cat, because your cat has existence also. Reason. Intelligence. You can know. You are intelligent. Okay? I hope. No, I am sure. There is no doubt about that. Huh? You will be not in class of philosophy. I never give a class to a dog or a cat. Huh? Sometimes they speak to their cat like an intelligent student. And the cat, and the dog, oh, follow you. No? But does he understand? I don't know. I don't think so. Anyway, but that they belong to the nature of finite being. So change belongs to finite being. And the perfection of life, that means the life in its totality, without any limitation, without beginning and end, life is the perfection of God. God is essentially life, but he does not move. That means it's not necessary to move to be living. Sometimes you see a student, he seems very quiet, but he's very active, he's very living. Why? Because he is thinking, he is reflecting, he is studying. And to study is to work, no? And working is not only those who have a broom or a shovel or an axe. To work, it is to be active, and to study is an activity of the mind, but is not apparently motion from that place to the other place. No? So in God, life is perfect, perfection, absolute, infinite life, and among those perfection, characteristic of life, in human life, is intelligence, is the capacity of knowing. But if man is able to know, because he is living, he has an intellect, God should have the same thing, and infinitely more, no? Without any limitation. Because I always forget infinity in every attribute of God. So if God is intelligent, he must be infinitely intelligent. So I come back to the text, no? But that they belong to the nature of finite being. Okay. What is essential to life is we call the self-activity. No? And the more perfect the self-activity is, the higher is more perfect the life. So now I can know that human life is superior to the life of your cat. I can know that only from your activities. No? How we can know the nature, the essence of a thing? What is the nature? The nature of a thing is the essence as principle of activity. You remember that? Very important. Huh? So we know a thing from its activities. So what is the higher activity we have as a human being? Make us different from the rest of creation. Rationality, thinking, rationality. Huh? We reason. Okay? That is our specific difference. And because of that, I can say my life is superior, my nature, the life I have, is superior to those who cannot reason, who cannot think, and cannot know abstractly. You know? Okay? We judge a thing from his fruit, no? From his activity, because we don't have a direct knowledge of the nature of a thing. We know things from their activities. Okay? I continue. What is the characteristic of life now? When we study philosophy of man, no? We saw the two characteristics of life is spontaneity and immanence. When you finish that class, you will say, it was useful to study philosophy of man before. Because all the class is based on philosophy of man, theory of knowledge. So a living being is able to act by itself, you know. When your cat stands up or your dog stands up to run after something, it is not the mouse who made the cat run. The cat stop himself, stand up and run after the mouse, you know. So he has a spontaneous activity. That means life is come from within. And the term of life stays within. You remember that? When you eat, to eat, to digest is an immanent activity. That means what you eat becomes you. When you study, it is an immanent activity. What you study becomes you. It's no more the teaching of St. Thomas or Aristotle or Father Legault or Francis or Benedict XVI. It is now you. It is a part of your personality. You acquire a new form. So that is characteristic of life. Spontaneity, immanence. So if we speak about the life of God, God is living. He is the most living being, but he must be the most, the life must come from him, and the fruit of his knowledge must stay in him. That it does not depend on another directly. When I am a living, as a living, I am autonomous. Of course, I depend on things to eat, etc. But my activity is autonomous. My principle of life is my soul. Not every morning I take a wire and plug that in the socket and say, okay, 5 minutes of charge my battery. After that, no. The life is from me, is coming from within. Okay? So I can say almost the source of my own activity. And the fruit of my activity stay in me. That are the characteristics of life. It can be digestion, it can be knowledge, it can be many human activity. So here you have a quotation of St. Thomas. I read that rapidly. Wherefore, that being whose act of understanding, it is its very nature. That means God is essentially intelligence. Okay? And which is in what it naturally possesses, is not determined by another, is not must have life in the most perfect degree, such is God, and in him principally is life. God is life. When Jesus said, I am the life, it's very serious. It's God. From this, the philosopher, Aristotle, concludes that God has life perfect and eternal, since his intellect is most perfect and always in act. So his intellect. So what makes life for us, a human life? It is principally because I think. Descartes, but he says, I think, therefore I exist. In fact, we should say, I exist, therefore I can think. I can think. Okay, I don't want to discuss that now. But the quality of God, God is infinitely perfect. He must possess all the perfection we find in creature. Creature has the power as a living spontaneity, spontaneous power. And you have immanent power, power of keeping in ourselves what we know, what we possess. Okay. Therefore, as the essence of God is infinite, mutable, simple, and eternal, that is the summary of last class, life in him must be infinite, immutable, simple, and eternal. So the difference between us, our life is not eternal. We begin to exist. Our life is not pure life. It's the passing from potency to what? We don't live everything in one instant. We leave that for beginning our conception to the rest of eternity as in our soul. So pure. So what God is intellect. In fact, Aristotle said that God is the thought thinking itself. The thought thinking itself. Well, here we have three things. You have the subject. You have the act. And we have the object. You remember that?
Yes.
when we know, there is a subject, the subject knows an object. So God is the thought, thinking himself. So he is at the same time is the subject, is the act, is the object. He must be that, otherwise he depends. Suppose God depends on the object outside of him. He will pass from potency to act. Therefore, God must know himself. So the perfect object of knowledge, if we know that, we studied that in philosophy of man, we cannot know without an object. So we know the object of God is himself. The perfect object of his knowledge, able to satisfy his intellect is on himself, infinitely. Only the infinite can answer the infinite. And the act of knowing himself is infinitely also. Everything is infinite. Everything is eternal. Everything is immutable. Everything is simple. God is simple in his essence. He's simple in his activity also. We cannot put in God, because to think is an activity. So the activity of God cannot pass from potency to act. Well, what is knowledge? You remember to know, to receive the form from thing, from the thing outside of us. I receive the form of coruscant, the form of kangaroo, etc. The form of justice, they come in me. It is, no, I depend on the object. The object is outside of me. Of course, my act of knowledge is spontaneous, and the fruit is immanent. But I depend on an object. So God cannot depend on an object. The reason why, the definition of a definition of Aristotle is very, very good. Is the thought thinking himself. For St. Thomas and Aristotle, what this make a person first is this knowledge, intellect. If I have no intellect, I cannot will. You remember that. The act of will depends on the act of intellect. Of course, here St. Thomas and St. Bonaventure, they insist one on the intellect, the other on the will. But anyway, you cannot love if you don't know. So for St. Thomas and Aristotle, the first faculty, the distinguishment, and we say, I think to know God is the fact that God is thinking himself perfectly. God knows perfectly. In fact, God realized perfectly what Socrates said. What did Socrates say? Note se auton. Know yourself. For him, is the best science, the most important science is to know oneself. But God is infinitely wise, infinitely intelligent. He knows himself because he is infinitely perfect, etc. Okay? I continue. Therefore, as the life in him must be infinite, immutable, simple, and eternal. And when I say life, I say also all living activities. And what are the most important living activity in man are to know, so the intellect, the faculty we call the intellect, and to will. So we have a chapter, we study the intellect of God, and we study the will of God, because they are the most perfect expression of life. The summit of life is not to eat, is not to swim, is not to sleep, it is to think and to will. That makes us apart the rest of creation. Okay? So God is life. In God life is eternal. That means in God all his activities are necessary eternal. Well, I cannot explain everything, but that will have many consequences when we study, for example, in future, the creation of the world. The act of creation in God must be eternal. If the act of creation in God is not eternal, he passed from potency to act. But the creation outside of him is not eternal. But in God it is eternal. What was about the prophet? He said, God knows me from all eternity. He knew me before I was in the womb of my mother. That means God knows me eternally in one present, eternally in one instant, but I exist in time. My dimension of living is not the same dimension of God. Is the reason why it is so difficult to have an idea of what will happen after our death. Totalitaire, aditaire, totally otherwise. Why? Because we have no experience of that. Even those who come back, they cannot explain that. Because nobody will understand. You remember St. Paul, but he said, I know someone who went to the third heaven, and he cannot say, we cannot express, because the reality after that is completely different from our experience. It's the same for our knowledge of God. When we know our God, we see everything before was straw. Who said that? Everything was straw. St. Thomas. At the end of his life, he said, oh, all that assume all that is straw. In fact, it's straw. We have only an analogical knowledge of God. But it's valuable. It is better to have an old picture of my mother than to have nothing. Because that picture represents my mother, even if it's a old picture. So I can have an imperfect knowledge, but it's better than to have no knowledge. Otherwise, we will be nothing. Nobody will get married. Nobody will enter community because nobody can know exactly what will happen. Nobody can know exactly who is his future wife and who is his future husband. Our knowledge, even on earth, is limited, a fortiori, when we speak about the life in God, the intellect. So if you compare the human life and God's life, the human life is in time, change and succession, it is in time, and the life of God is eternal. You can add that. The first paragraph, in time and eternal. The human life is limited because it belongs to a finite being. The life of God is infinite being. And the third one, life of the man is in space. We are in time and space. God is eternal, is not in space. He is pure spiritual. He is pure, he has no limitation. We are limited because we are heightened potency, and we are also in matter. Okay? So at the bottom, you have a quotation of Aristotle. Life belongs to God because the activity of thought is life. The activity, when you think, it is a vital operation. To think is a vital operation. And if we are immortal, we continue to think. That means after our death, we continue to be living. My soul is immortal because it will continue to think. It will continue to love. In fact, we say eternal life, no? Life. But the operation will not be to eat, will not be to sleep, will be to think and to love, to know and to love. Okay? I go to the next page. So the activity of God is, is immanent. Well, we saw that here, immanent. Well, self-activity is immanent. What is the meaning of that? Three things. First, not only in the same sense that it originates in the living agent, because my activity comes from myself, spontaneity, but also in the sense that it remains, it stays with the agent, and is a perfection of the agent. So when you study, you are the source of the activity, come from yourself, of course, but you are the one who take benefit of that. And that perfection, to know, is stay in you. So when you acquire some knowledge or some virtue, it is a perfection, it is immanent, stay. Immanere means to stay in. To stay in, immanere. Manere, mansion, house. To stay in the house, stay in you. But transitive activity, what is that? It is to pass to an object outside of the agent. For example, you kick a ball, So the motion comes from you as a soccer player, and the ball is moved by you. Okay? And to produce a perfection that is not in you, but in the ball. When you kick the ball, you are not flying. The ball is flying. Understand, huh? So when you are in a transitive action, a transient activity, the perfection is given to the object, is not given to the subject. When, for example, a sculptor, Michelangelo sculpted Moses or sculpted David, beautiful statue. The perfection, the product, the perfection is not in the sculptor, stays in the object. So that is a transitive activity. It's the contrary of immanent activity. And that is important. That is very important. The effect is in the object, not in the subject. Why? Because a great importance of that for God. Because when God created the world, the effect is in the world, is not in himself. Otherwise it changes, yes, brother.
Would eating be an immanent?
Immanent, because of course not totally immanent, but a part stays in you. Huh? You eat to assimilate. Huh? What is digestion? Is assimilation. Huh? Assimilation. Okay, that means what you assimilate becomes you. Maybe some cell here is from a chicken, the other cell is from a fish. Yeah, those cells come from somewhere, no? And we renew our body every 7 years. So that means my cells here come from my assimilation we call eating. Eating is a active, is a spontaneous and immanent activity. Of course, I depend on an object. I depend on food. But you know, I can pass the food through a tube, and no, it's not the same. The tube is not assimilating, but you're the your system assimilate what you need for your survival, for your growth, for your energy. That is a marvel. Think about that. Okay, brother, yes?
What did you say, about 7 years, Father?
Every 7 years, according to scientists, our cells are renewed.
Oh.
So it is my 11th body.
Yes.
Except the cell of the brain, but all the cells of the body are renewed. Otherwise, if you will have no more energy, little by little you will die. In fact, eating I told that to the other class yesterday. To eat is a moral action. It's a moral action. If you refuse to eat, to suicide, to commit a mortal sin. Huh? No, I say to suicide. To suicide, not to win $5 or $50. Because nobody wants to suicide, huh? But somebody, they do that. And first they stop eating, they stop drinking, they want to die. You know? So it's a duty to eat. Huh? Okay. Transitive action cannot be attributed to God. For, as St. Thomas says, these activities are not perfection of the agent, but perfection of the object affected by the action. Don't forget that. Huh? For example, that, how do you say that? I forgot the name. What is the name of that? Quill. Okay, that quill was made. And the perfection, it was made by the Dr. Cynthia Tullen. And you look attentively, you see the signature of seminarian. My signature is somewhere, I don't know. She's there. It is there. That the perfection is in the quilt. Stays in the quilt. And the person who did that, they can disappear, so the effect is not necessary in the cause. The effect is in the perfection is not in the cause, is in the effect. So when God created the world, he does not become more perfect. But he makes something with some perfection, and he changes nothing. A good example of that is teaching. Remember when you were in first grade, second grade. Your teacher all they did is study algebra, study trigonometry, because at normal school they were obliged to study that. But now she is teaching how to add for addition. 5 plus 8, or 8 minus 5. She communicates that to you. What happened? You acquire knowledge in arithmetic, mathematics. Did she lose something? When I teach, I am losing my knowledge? No. I stay the same. I have the same knowledge, but you acquire. So it's an analogy. When God, the effect, the perfection is in the effect. The change is in the effect. Is not in the cause. Otherwise, otherwise God will pass from potency to act when He created the world. He did not pass. He is absolutely perfect. Okay. I go to just 1.2.3. So God's activity must be His own perfection. And what is His own perfection? It is simplicity. God is simple. So that if God is simple, His activity must be simple. What is to be simple is to be pure act. So that means no mixture of potency and act. Therefore, the knowledge of God must be perfect. There is no progress in His knowledge. And that comes back to yesterday we see about prayer. We don't inform God. God, I call you because I said to you, and tomorrow I will have an examination, a game, and I am afraid, so that can you help me with the Holy Spirit, God does not need a line. He knows before we call. Okay? Simplicity. And that simplicity of knowledge is one with this being. Don't forget, the subject, the act, and the object, and God are one. We cannot put any distinction. He is perfectly the one who knows. He is perfectly the act of knowledge. He is perfectly the object known. In Him there is only one reality. I am. So. Okay. I continue. Nevertheless, it is true that in virtue of God's immanent activity, there does result outside of God a creation. Of course, a creation is a fact. But God also is pure act, is pure perfection, is pure knowledge. So, can I say that the creation can change something in God? No. No more than when the teacher teaches 5 plus 3 equals 5, she does not lose her knowledge in mathematics. Okay? I continue, because that is very, very important now. And therefore, God's activity is, as far as it regards the universe and the creation, is said to be virtually transitive. So virtually, you see the difference between real and virtual. When you look at yourself in the mirror, what kind of image do you have? A virtual image. A wrong image. A virtual image. That means you cannot fix that image. You cannot touch that image. But when you project an image on the screen, that is a real image. We say that in physics. It's the same here. So, of course, God is in infinite knowledge. He knows that the creation will pass from nothing to something. But it is in Him a virtual activity. That means God cannot, otherwise if it is a real activity, it will pass from potency to act. Like you are not real in the mirror. You can say, oh, I don't like you. Punch the mirror. You punch the mirror, you don't punch you. It is a virtue, it's not a real. Don't forget, when you look at yourself in the mirror, it's not a real image. It's a fake image. Anyway, yeah, totally. If you your right hand is your left hand there. Huh? No. No. When I am in front of the mirror, my right hand become my left hand, and my left hand become my right hand. You are not real. You are not real. That is a virtual image. So in God, the knowledge he has of his creation is a virtual knowledge. That means he knows from all eternity, because if creation exists, because he knows that. To know for him is to make things existing. But that changes nothing in himself. He is not more learned because he knows that the world exists. In fact, it is not the word that informed him. It is God who informed the world. Interesting, huh? When you look at an object, you look at a kangaroo, you see a kangaroo for the first time. The form of the kangaroo come and form you. But God, when he sees a kangaroo, it is his form which made the kangaroo. His thought is creative, is a power of creation. When God thinks a kangaroo, he makes the kangaroo. So he put the form in the kangaroo, he does not receive the form of the kangaroo. Otherwise, he will depend on the kangaroo to know what is a kangaroo. We depend on kangaroo, we depend on an object to know. But can God depend on this creation to know? On the contrary, his knowledge is creative. Man David et creatation. He thought, you come in and think exist. So his knowledge is not depending on external knowledge. That means all the knowledge of God is with it. Suppose you know, in one instant, all the activity you will do in your life. Everything in one instant, you know, you become a bishop, you become a superior general, you become, I don't know, a good president of hospital, you know. You know all that, including your death. Oh, it's not so funny, huh? So, no, we know, we cannot, if I wouldn't be able to know that in one instant, even as a human being, I will not be able to say, I am producing that. But God, he knows everything that exists as he himself being, thinking them. So his thought is creative. His thought is not receptive. You understand, huh? He cannot think by receiving some information. So when you pray, we don't inform God. Huh? It is God who informs you. Don't forget Saint Irenaeus. Huh? He cannot. Otherwise, he will depend on an object outside, and he will depend on this creation. You say, I did not know I created you. When did I do that? No. But if think about you, you exist in time. It is exactly what he said in the Bible. I know you before you were in the womb of your mother. For all eternity, I knew. That means in the will of God, he will our existence for all eternity. But it does not depend on us. For example, the carpenter who did this, he know the existence of the desk when the desk was made. So his knowledge of the desk depends on the desk he made. He made the desk, but the desk as completely finished is not after it was made by the carpenter. But God, no. God thinks the desk, and the desk exists. Huh? He thinks the universe, and the universe exists. That means it does not depend on an object to know. That is very difficult for us, because to know we depend on an object. What is the unique object God can know perfectly? It is himself. He knows everything in himself. He knows all the activity all the effect he will do in the universe, the planets, the man, the cats, the flowers. He knows that in his own essence. He knows us in himself. He knows us in himself. Okay? Suppose your mother knew you when you were in her womb. Huh? Oh, my little sister of the Eucharist. Oh, my bishop. Or the mother of Francis. Oh, my sweet Pope. But your mother was not able to know you from within. Huh? But God knows us from within. That means He knows us much better than we know ourselves. He knows everything from Him. Because nothing exists without His knowledge. Nothing escapes His knowledge. Because not a single electron, a single photon, a single proton can escape His knowledge. Why? Because the proton, the photon, the electron exist because He thinks them. God knows them not because they exist, but they exist because God thinks them. Because God knows them. So His knowledge is creative. Okay, I continue. Next page. Knowledge of God in scholastic philosophy. So here we have to come back to that chart we have here. So we know through our senses, you remember that, and finally our imagination is able to form express in sensible express species. You remember that? Huh? That we call, what is the name of that? Phantasm. Okay? That phantasm is singular, or particular, than phantasm is in time and space, etc. And before that, our senses gave us a sensible, impressed species. Okay? Now, that is sense knowledge. Sense knowledge. But to pass through that, we need an intellect. And we have the agent intellect. You remember that?
Yes.
Huh? And the agent intellect has the power to illuminate the phantasm, and by reflection to abstract. Abstraction, and to make something universal. In that, so we have the first ear, it is a intelligible, impress species. In that intelligible species, we can tell the insight. We understand. Eureka, I understand. After that, we can express that to a concept. And what is a concept or an idea? It is an intelligible, express species. Okay? So now we know God, don't forget, we know God from our experience of knowledge. So how we can use that to know God? Okay, I go to the text here. So to know is to receive the form of thing, the form of intelligible thing. That means, remember, back the fact a thing exists, a being, any being is one, any being is true, any being is good. And when I say true, that means intelligible. So, what comes from the thing, it is their intelligibility. What is the intelligibility of the death? It is not the matter, it is the form. You remember that? Things are made with matter and form. It is the form that comes to my mind. So knowledge is a communion between the form of the object and my own form. That is our way of thinking knowledge. Okay? So our next paragraph. Our knowledge is not innate, is acquired through our senses. The next paragraph. Now, I can write that because my intellect is active. It's an intellect. So that is the theory. We know But we can to apply that now in theology. Go to page 4. Page 3, in fact, is the summary of the theory of knowledge. Page 3 is the summary of that. So those who study with me philosophy of man, we should understand easily page 3. Page 4, now we try to apply that to God, to the knowledge of God. Because we cannot do otherwise. We can know God only through our human experience of knowledge. So, knowledge of God. Well, first, can God receive a perfection from an object? No. Can God be informed by an object or by man? No. I told you I cannot call God and say, hey, I have a good news to say to you. You know, God, I have an A. I thank you very much. God knows you have an A before you begin to study philosophy. Okay. But it's not a reason not to thank Him. We have to thank Him. But we should not think, you know, we inform God. You know, God, I inform you that my cat is sick. Please heal my cat, you know. You love so much St. Francis of Assisi. You should take care of my cat. God knows your cat is sick from all eternity. If God doesn't know that, He is not God. Sometimes that's almost insignificant what I say. But it is very deep. Think about Jesus, what He said. Huh? All the hair of your head are counted by my Father. He knows exactly how many you have and how many you lost. Yeah.
More than others. Father, please explain. I just don't understand it. It sounds like, and this is probably blasphemous, but I don't care. It sounds like, you know, when you're testing a car to see if the brakes work, the guy knows that the brakes work, but he just wants to test the car. You know what I mean? And it sounds like we're a bunch of crash dummies, kind of. Like,
Okay.
you know what I mean?
Well, okay. If you want, I cannot answer completely your anxiety now.
Okay.
Because we have other chapter after. Huh? Yeah, the most important for you, it is how to conciliate the knowledge of God, the power of God, and your freedom. Okay? So we try to answer that. I prophesy that you will not be satisfied. Because, in fact, there is a large part of mystery. The same thing you cannot explain totally, perfectly, why you are here today.
That's an excellent point, Father.
Okay? So if you cannot explain perfectly why you are here today, or why your father married your mother,
why did that? You know? No, thank you.
No, it's your question is excessively serious. It is one of the most difficult in philosophy and in theology. And St. Augustine had to go to the dentist after that because he broke all his teeth. Huh? Yeah, that is the problem of predestination, the problem of free will, the problem of cooperation. So as a philosopher, we try to find an explanation, but we cannot pretend to give a sufficient satisfying answer. Okay?
No, yeah.
But what is important is to understand at least what we can know with absolute certitude.
Okay.
It is what I am teaching. We know with absolute certitude God is infinitely perfect, complete. He can receive nothing from other. So his knowledge is not depending on another. It depends on himself. But the existence of the rest, the creation, depends on his knowledge. You know? Like the desk here. The knowledge of the extent of the desk from the carpenter depend on the fact that the desk is finished.
Yeah.
But for God, no, His knowledge is producing the world, the creation. Okay, so it is important for you to have some point very clear, so we can refer to that when you discuss pure act existing by himself. But when you attain those things, after that you have some repair, some marks you can hold to that to try to give an answer. But I know, I did that for 52 years, never, the best answer of St. Thomas will satisfy your appetite for truth. Because a large part of that is a mystery. Okay?
Thank you, Father.
I go to page 4. So, for the divine essence, as the ultimate foundation of possibility of things, that means nothing exists if it is not taught by God, is the exemplary of all things actual and possible. So God is the first cause of all things. We saw before that making something, He made the thing participating in His being, in His perfection. And when He make a beautiful flower, the flower shares in the beauty of God, in the being of God. And because of that, we say also that God is the exemplary of all things. You know, when a sculptor wants to sculpt a statue, suppose Michelangelo entered the class here, he say, I want to sculpt Moses. He look at you, he say, you there, you there, you there. You should the best to represent Moses, because you are strong, you are, you become the exemplar, the model. So God, not only God is the cause, He is the exemplar. That means He makes us to His image. He makes things to His image also. Because, of course, not the same way as man. Because they exist. Because they are beautiful. Because they are good. Because they are true. Because they are one. Interesting. No, I find that interesting. He is the exemplar. That means we can know God directly, but we can know God through this effect. If we find beauty, we saw that. If we find order, we can go to the exemplar, the one who did that. And God cannot take a model outside of Him. He cannot say, wait a minute, I will copy that. No. God is Himself the exemplar of everything. So He is the cause of everything. He is the model. Exemplar means the model. We share in the perfection of God. The flower, in its beauty, share in the perfection of God. It's a new approach to look at the creation of God. To see that the creation of God is reflecting the beauty of God, the goodness of God, the power of God, the majesty of God. Because the effect is made at the image of the producer. So the Word share in the perfection of God. Therefore, God is the exemplar, the exemplary of all things. So now, the divine essence is always present to divine intellect, being identified with the simplicity of God. That means the intellect of God and the essence of God are one. To exist in God, it is to think. And to think is to exist. To love is to exist, and to exist is to love. That means that the activity on God are one with this essence. And so the object of the divine intellect is essence immanent. God knows Himself. The object, the perfect object of His knowledge is Himself, and He knows everything He created in Himself. So God it's not necessary for God to study everything. He knows everything from within. Because He is the cause and the exemplar of everything. And He makes us sharing in His power, in His beauty, in His being, in His love, in His spirit, etc. All the perfection. And the form of all intelligible things are in the mind of God. God has all the idea we can have, He knows that. Okay? Therefore, in God, intellect, the presence of the form of the intelligible thing, and then because every being, remember, is true, that therefore is intelligible, is not the result of any activity coming from the object known, So the perfection of knowledge of God does not depend on his effects. My knowledge depends on my effects. How I can know that I am a good musician? When I play the piano or the organ, no? How you can know that you have a beautiful voice when you keep silent? No. When you sing. So your knowledge of yourself as a singer depend on the effect. God cannot depend on the effect. He knows us and himself as the exemplar of everything, as the cause of everything. No? So the knowledge of God is in God, it's not in ourselves. He knows us. No? Okay? In human mind, the form is it is the intelligible species. We saw that. Huh? Is a perfection added to what I am. In God, the intelligible species, the idea or the concept of a thing, is the intellective. It is the intellect itself. God is the subject. God is the act of knowledge. God is the object of knowledge. Do you understand? Yes? I adore you. If you understand, you are God. Huh? But you try to understand, you are human. Huh? Because if you understand, you are enough of understanding God. Therefore, God is and you are one. But if you say, I try to understand, I mean, I am in potency to understand, I am not God. You remember St. Augustine, when he was on the shore, and the young baby put the water? It's the same. But we try. We try. It is a proof that we are intelligent. And when we try to understand, when we study, we glorify God. Because we are at his image. We use our intellect, we use our heart, etc. So in God, the intelligible, I say, okay, God understands himself through himself. Page 5. So the paragraph 1.4 is a summary of what we said, a summary. Knowledge in God is not a perfection added to the divine essence. It is rather God's own essential perfection. So the knowledge of God is a perfection. It is his essence. It's not a part. It is his essence. We cannot put part in God. And identify with his essence. In consequence, knowledge of God must have all the attributes of the essence. And what are the attributes? We saw first the attribute infinity. Is the most perfect. No limit in his knowledge. Because there is no limit in his being. In the sense that he embraces the knowledge of all things knowable. B, in the further tense that it must be possessed in the most perfect way. Not only God knows everything, he knows everything in the most perfect way we can. And finally, all things must know that all things in one simple act of knowing. Because God is eternal. What is eternity? It is one instant, the duration of one instant without beginning and end. So that means he knows everything, he wills everything in one instant. Is eternal. That means his knowledge is eternal. He did not know us when we began to exist. He knew us from all eternity. He knew myself. He knew I exist here from all eternity. And what is to know in the Bible is to love also. Because I exist. So not only, and we see that in the next chapter, on the love of God and the will of God, and the love of God, the will of God, and the intellect, because I cannot love what I don't know. Okay? Secondly, omniscience. He must know everything. In his infinite degree of immateriality or total separation. So God not only is immaterial, totally immaterial, but he is totally apart, totally assez. What is assez? Independent. Independent. So he depends on nothing to know. He does not depend on an object outside of himself to know. a remark. If then we speak at time of divine ideas, we cannot mean so many distinct acts in God, but only distinct things which are represented in the mind of God. That means when we speak about, for example, the multiplicity of His effects in the creation, or the multiplicity of the attributes of God, it is in our way of thinking. It is not in the reality of God. When we want to define something, we have to use sometimes many definitions, many descriptions, but the reality is the same. So that if we see multiplicity, it is not in God, it is in the effects, and not in the cause. Okay? I can give you an analogy for that, poor analogy, but electricity. Electricity is the same everywhere in the wires, but the effects are quite different. Microwaves is not the same thing as a television. So, but it's the same electricity. But of course, electricity is not God, because it must be produced by a generator, but by analogy. Okay? See, next one, independent from matter, from any potency. So, in fact, knowledge is based on immateriality. You remember? To know the root of knowledge is immateriality. But the immateriality in God and the immateriality in man and immateriality in the knowledge of a cat is not the same. The mode is different. But it is immateriality. But God is absolutely, totally immaterial, depending absolutely. For example, my soul is independent of materiality in his activity, but we need my body. My soul needs my body to know. God is totally immaterial. He's a pure spirit. Okay? I go to page 7. So the divine knowledge is necessary and free. That seems paradoxal. That is necessary. That means His knowledge is His essence. What is the essence of God? Is to exist by Himself. And God exists as it, by Himself. So the knowledge of God also is as it. That means God does not depend on another to know. He knows in Himself, okay, by Himself. Okay? But at the same time, when I say that, I can say His knowledge is necessary and He is free. Why is free? Because He depends on nothing. So He is not attached to an object to know. I cannot know what is a flower if there is no flower. I depend on flower to know flower. But God does not depend on flower to know flower. His knowledge is so powerful, is so perfect, that He makes flower. He does not receive, He gives. Like His love. His love cannot receive, but His love is essentially giving. Giving, because I cannot nothing. So when God created the world, when God gave us graces of, it is a pure act of love. Creation. When you understand that, you look at the beauty in nature, even at the beautiful snow, it's a pure act of love of God. God loves so much, then He gave us snow. You say God is infinitely generous, no? Okay, I continue. Remark. Necessary knowledge means the knowledge of necessary thing, from knowledge being contingent. So God has a necessary knowledge. He cannot not know. Nothing escape His knowledge. Is the reason why we see God is omniscient. He knows everything. Omniscient. Science. He knows everything. Okay? And He depends on nothing to know. I can know many things, but I depend on the thing, on the object. Okay? So contingent things do not exist, do not need to exist. And will not exist unless God will them to exist. That means the knowledge of God is linked with His will. And it is what we study in the next chapter. Because we cannot study everything at the same time. But the intellect of will, the intelligence of will of God, and His will, they are linked. And to know in God is to will. That means his knowledge is at the same time his love. But we distinguish knowledge and love because we are in our dimension, human dimension. But in God we cannot put separation. It is true for us, I cannot love if I don't know. But in me, in each of us, the knowledge is distinct from the will. But in God, the knowledge of God, the intellect of God is one with his essence, and his love, his will, is one with his essence. I can say God is intelligence. I can say God is love. So St. Thomas is right, and St. Bonaventure is right. But one insists on the knowledge of God, the other insists more on the love of God. Okay, free knowledge means the knowledge of contingent being. So God is not obliged to know thing. The thing, you know, for example, if I am in front of a lion, I cannot deny the presence of the lion, the form of the lion. And for me, I'm not, in front of the object, we are not free. We receive what we know. But God cannot be like that. On the contrary, if something exists because he knows it, at the same time he wills it. His knowledge, it is also his love. And his love is creative. Okay? So, consequently, his knowledge, okay. St. Thomas at the bottom, he has 16 considerations, and that 16 considerations are the summary of what I told you since the beginning of the semester. But they are important. Read that attentively. First, I go rapidly. In God there exists the most perfect knowledge. Secondly, page 8, secondly, God understands himself through himself. We started that before. So we have a comparison after between man and God. I already explained that. That is a review. Go to next paragraph, 1.5.3. God knows himself as much as he is knowable. And for that reason, the perfect comprehension himself. That means God knows himself because he is infinitely perfect. The unique object of the knowledge of God, worthy of God, is himself. He cannot not know himself. And Aristotle was right to say that God is the thought thinking himself. But Aristotle was so impressed by that knowledge of God, he said not God cannot be distracted by the problem. So he did not accept the divine providence. He had difficulty to link that idea of the perfection of God knowing himself with the fact that God takes care of his creation.
Sounds very familiar.
Yeah, so it is for the future. Next paragraph. God knows himself as much as knowable. Okay. Next, God is in God's intellect and the object and the intelligible species, the subject and the act are one. We saw that. The next paragraph. He knows other things, not in themselves, but in himself, as much as his essence contains the similitude. You remember that? The image, the resemblance. Of things other than himself. So he knows the similitude in himself, but he knows that in virtual way. It does not depend on the thing to do. Next paragraph. God can know in himself all other things with proper knowledge, because the nature proper to each consists in some degree of participation in the divine perfection. So he knows everything existing outside of him, because everything outside of him participates in his being, participates in his perfection, and he is the cause, not because their being is their being as such, that means with their perfection, with their quality. Okay? So that the idea of participation is very, very important. He knew all the ways, not only he knew the thing, he knows all the ways a thing can be participated. God knows only the thing that exists and will exist. He knows also all the things able to exist. That means he knows all the possible, the possible. For example, when a woman aborts, that child not only God knows that the child died, he knows also all the possible descendants of this child. When you prepare a celebration, a feast, for example, you discuss about the different possibilities, what you can prepare, chicken, hot dog, hamburger, etc., wine, Coca-Cola, many, many possibilities. Only one or two will be real. God knows every possibility. The limit of his knowledge is contradiction. God cannot think contradiction. He cannot think a square round or a round square. But all the possibility is, and we cannot put a limit to his knowledge. Even if man has a great imagination, he can imagine a lot of things. Or this baby could have become the prime minister, that baby can become the president, he can become the pope, he can become a gangster also, all the possibility. But no, God knows all the possibility. We cannot put a limit to his knowledge. Okay? And next paragraph. God causes all things by his intellect, since his being is his act of understanding. And hence, his knowledge must be cause of things insofar as he wills is joined to it. That means what God knows a thing, and knowing the thing, he makes the thing, at the same time, in the same act, he wills the thing. That means he loves the thing. That means everything existing is an expression of the love of God. Not only is an expression of his knowledge, is an expression of his power. So omniscience, omnipotent. There is nothing exists without he knows that thing and he wills that thing. Okay? So hence, the knowledge of God as the cause of things is usually known as the knowledge of approbation. We will see that in the future, a knowledge of approbation. Those who exist. Because he knows things will not exist. But someone, he approves they exist. Knowledge of God is not discursive, no reasoning, we saw that. Number 9, God knows all things, whatever that is anyway are, and so far he can be said to have knowledge of things that actually are not. Not only God knows what exists, he knows also what can exist, but they don't exist. It is what we call possible. Possible. For example, when can I say a seminarian is a priest in potency? When will be a priest? For the moment, I cannot say that. If I was sure that he will become a priest, I say you are in potency, and you are possible. I cannot say that. But God cannot say it. So the possible, many can, for example, an oak has many acorns in his life. Only a few one will become 3 oak. The other will be for the food of squirrel. Page 10. God knows evil as a privation of God. We will see that in the next paragraph. God knows the singular thing one by one. One by one. 12. God knows infinite things. So he knows infinite perfection. He knows himself. 13. God knows contingent things. Because contingent things cannot exist by themselves. They must exist by another. And 14, God knows all enunciation God before. God knows every word, every judgment you will do from the beginning to the end of the world. God knows your thoughts. God knows your desire. God knows your dreams. God knows all your beats of heart. He knows everything. And you say it's not true, he is not God. So, when we say thy will be done, Yeah, in the hand of God. Okay? But don't forget, it's not terror, it is love. Even in philosophy, I can't say that. Because God does not know us. He does not need us. So if we exist because He loves us, He loves the cockroach, He loves the mosquito, We don't love it, but he loved it. He created, a snake. God's knowledge is invariable, immutable. In finally, 16, God has speculative and practical knowledge. And God has of himself a speculative knowledge only, but of other things, practical knowledge. Of course, God himself has a speculative knowledge. It depends on nothing. But he has also a practical knowledge of things. He knows everything. He knows, for example, how, what is the principle of hydrostatic. He knows the functioning of electricity. He knows all that. Well, why? Because if they exist, if they are moving, because they are sustained in existence. And to know them is to will them. In the next chapter, we will study the will of God, how it can fit with our freedom, and we will see also how God can sustain, participate, sustain His creation when the world is created. We call that conservation and divine providence. And you know, everything is linked with everything. When you touch something, all the other follow. Okay, have a good break. Enjoy.